Welcome back everyone. The iPhone 13 Pro came out a couple of months ago, so let's go ahead and do a camera comparison between the 13 Pro and the iPhone XS and see which specific phone has the better camera. Now I'm automatically going to default to the 13 Pro, but in terms of the hardware, the iPhone 13 Pro has a wide, ultra-wide, and telephoto lens, where the iPhone XS has a wide and a telephoto lens, so it doesn't have that ultra-wide sensor on the iPhone XS. They both can do 4K at 60 on the back, which is great. On the front, you do have the ability of doing 4K at 60 on the front of the iPhone 13 Pro, where in the iPhone XS you can only do 1080p at 60. So that's a pretty big difference in my opinion. You're getting way more capability from the 13 Pro. On top of that, you do have that cinematic mode, which is a new feature that the XS does not have. It's portrait mode for video, and that's a pretty big feature for sure. So if you want an iPhone with a better camera, the 13 Pro is the better one. But how much better is it? Now, starting off with these first photos, the iPhone XS photos will be on the left, the iPhone 13 Pro photos will be on the right. So with this first photo, I will tell you, I don't know why the iPhone 13 Pro, I think it's because of that macro mode we had at that time, it was just not blurring out the background of some subjects that I had, which was very annoying. So with this first photo, you can easily tell that the iPhone XS does look a little bit better. If we go ahead and zoom in right here, again, 13 Pro's here, you can see that the colors, I think, look better on the iPhone XS, but I think that has a lot to do with the background blur. It looks a little bit sharper on the 13 Pro, but if you look at the background, I mean, the background is completely still in focus on the iPhone 13 Pro. When you look at the iPhone XS, I mean, this is pretty much, blurred out, which is exactly what I wanted to. I tapped to focus on every single photo I took in this comparison. So even in the background, I mean, it's very annoying that the background didn't get blurred on the iPhone 13 Pro. The iPhone XS definitely looks a lot better. But it's very interesting because if we make our way over to our next photo, essentially the same exact thing happened. With the iPhone 13 Pro, when you zoom in, or actually, when you're not even zoomed in, when you're close to a subject, it doesn't take the photo in that background blur. Now there's a feature that did this, but at this time when I was taking this photo and video, it did not have that capability, which was very annoying. So for sure, the iPhone XS, surprisingly for these first two photos, definitely looked a lot better. When you look at the background, I mean, you look right here and you look right here, you're definitely getting a much better background blur on the XS than the 13 Pro. But now that may change a little bit, so keep that in mind. I don't want to harp on it too much because it may have been fixed by now, but that was a very annoying thing. If you look right here, I mean, a little bit of a difference on both. It does look like the 13 Pro photo looks more dull than the iPhone XS photo, which is very interesting because the XS is like 3 years old as of this point. And the next photo is when things start changing a little bit. You can kind of see that the iPhone 13 Pro photo definitely looks a lot more brighter. Not brighter, it looks a lot more sharper. And that red on the iPhone 13 Pro looks really, really good. If we go and zoom into kind of like the same area here, we can just zoom in without the shadow. You can kind of see that, in my opinion, the colors look a lot better on something like an iPhone 13 Pro than on something like an iPhone XS. That doesn't mean the XS photo looks bad, but it does seem to me that the iPhone 13 Pro photo, the red in the brick looks a lot better. So if you're somebody who's going to be taking a lot of outdoor photos of just, I guess, landscapes and stuff, you're going to be getting a much better looking photo from something like a 13 Pro than from something like an iPhone XS. So that's a pretty big thing to keep in mind as well. Now, this next photo is very interesting too. So you can see pretty much I went to the area with the worst lighting conditions I could find. They're really, really bad photos. And in this specific case, you can actually see that both of them don't look great by any means. The iPhone XS photo looks a little bit more brighter and it looks more lighter, which I kind of think is cool. I don't have a problem with it. One thing I've been looking at though for detail is kind of looking at this bottom corner right here. And I've been able to see that for the most part, the iPhone 13 Pro does a good job at reducing a lot of that noise in the background. So that's a really good thing. If you're somebody who's going to be taking a lot of darker photos, you're going to be getting, I think, a better experience from something like an iPhone 13 Pro than an iPhone XS. So even if you look at like the edges right here, actually I do think the edges look a little bit better, a little more sharp on the iPhone 13, on the iPhone XS, which is very interesting. So in terms of this photo, that covers it up here, nothing else super crazy. This next photo, again, all we took is just this photo in the lighting condition. And you can see again, darkening a little bit more on the iPhone 13 Pro. The iPhone XS looks a little bit less sharp. But when you actually look at this background portion right here, so if we go ahead and zoom into this little, whatever, comfort zone little tab, if we go and zoom in on both, one thing I've been able to see is that the iPhone 13 Pro did a good job at keeping this at least somewhat, sharp in the background. But on top of that, Whether that's a feature or not, it's up to you. But the noise in the iPhone XS photo, I think there's a lot more noise on this photo than the 13 Pro. Now, there's still a lot of noise in this photo as well, but you can see right here, right down this little area right there, there's just so much grain and so much noise. When you look at that same spot on the iPhone 13 Pro photo, you can see it looks a lot more, and it just looks a lot more nicer. It looks a lot more sharp. You can tell where the edges are, and it's definitely a big feature for something like an iPhone 13 Pro. So when it comes down to these photos, definitely a huge aspect for that one as well. Now this next photo is pretty much nothing crazy, just took it of this, whatever this curtain is. So nothing really crazy about this. This next photo too is also very interesting. So again, these photos were taken at the almost exact same time, so it's not like they were like different days or weeks. And you can see that both of them interpreted the colors a little bit differently. It looks like the 10 has brightened the photo up a little bit. The 13 Pro kind of darkened the photo, which I don't have a problem with. I think it also looks pretty cool. So when you look at something like an iPhone, XS, for example, if we look all the way at the bottom, you can see that both of them look pretty good. But again, we're seeing the same thing where there's a little bit more noise going on with the iPhone XS photo than the iPhone 13 Pro photo. So that's something we've been seeing time and time again. So I don't really think it's a crazy big deal, but it is something to keep in mind. Even here, it looks pretty much the same too. So I don't really see too many differences. It's not until you start zooming in, but one thing that you can see right here and versus the same exact spot with the iPhone 13 Pro, it does look a little bit more darker on the 13 Pro. I kind of like that, but I do like being able to see a lot of the different things with the iPhone XS as well. So I don't think one is necessarily featureful here, but they're both pretty good. Now this next photo was of portrait mode on both of these. Now they both support portrait mode on animals as far as I can remember, and both of them do look pretty good. The background seems fairly blurred. I do think the iPhone 13 Pro photo looks a little bit better in this specific case. If we just zoom into like this top portion here and we zoom into the top portion here, both of them do look fairly nice. The green on the iPhone 13 Pro looks a little bit more sharper and darker, which I kind of prefer. But everything else looks kind of the same. I really don't think there's that big of a difference. They both did a good job at blurring out the background for a majority of this photo, which is nice. So I don't really think you're going to notice a massive difference in portrait mode, but like I mentioned, the iPhone 13 Pro does have that new cinematic mode, which is kind of cool. Here you're starting to see a little bit of a difference. You can see it's a little more brighter here. So I would say the 13 Pro is better, but it's still very, very close between them. Now, I wanted to demonstrate the capability behind the lenses of both. So these are both photos on their wide-angle lenses. So you can see they're pretty much zoomed out all the way. You can see the iPhone 13 Pro is able to zoom in just as much as the iPhone XS. This is both photos zoomed in for the most part. Now, zoomed out, these are both photos zoomed out completely all the way. So you can see how much more you're able to get in a photo on the iPhone 13 Pro than on an iPhone XS. I mean, it's like two completely different settings for the most part. So you're definitely getting a much more capable camera from the 13 Pro than on the iPhone XS without a doubt. Now finally, this is just a basic photo. One thing I've been seeing is if we move in and zoom in all the way in the back, we can see that there's a little bit more noise going on with the iPhone XS photo. Even though it looks a little bit brighter, it looks like there may have been more sun. So it's very interesting that there's more noise here. So I have been saying that the iPhone 13 Pro does a great job at reducing the amount of noise. But like I mentioned, if you have to zoom in that much, like nobody's really going to be zooming in that much into a photo. If we go ahead and zoom into like this specific area right here, you can see that they may be blurred out a little bit more. We'll just go into this line. And I do think the colors look a little bit more better on the iPhone XS. They look a little bit more cooler. But the 13 Pro, you can kind of tell each individual tiny little thing here, which is nice. Also, I think you're getting a little bit more of the actual like messiness and everything about this chair, which could be a feature for some. It looks like there's like just a cooler color on the iPhone XS. So I don't really think one photo like wins right in this case, but one thing I will definitely tell you to sum up this comparison, I think the iPhone 13 Pro for sure is the better camera. I think it's quite obvious to tell that. I think it has a lot more capability. I think it's a beautiful phone, but I do think the iPhone XS is right behind it. As you guys could tell, it really wasn't super far behind that specific camera. And I think when you're picking up a phone like this, you don't want it to be just completely outdated. And I don't think you're getting that with the iPhone XS, but I definitely do think you're getting a more capable phone from something like the iPhone 13 Pro. But the iPhone XS, to be honest, is right behind it. There is not that big of a difference between these at all. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.